In the autumn of 2010, I undertook a project in contemplative inquiry focused in place. For 8.5 weeks, I lived alone in the woods on the lower slope of a mountain in Maine. For that time, I had a canoe with me and a tarp for shelter, and good friends bringing me resupplies of food every week or two. And otherwise, I had that place, the forest there, the lake, and the mountain, and my own thoughts, and my own silence. The following is an excerpt from my field journal, taken from the latter days of October during that time. October 18th. Breath is wind, but wind is not breath. The common metaphor misleads. Breath is rhythm, its nature consisting in rhythm as much as it consists in air, a linking cycle of rise and fall, each necessitating the next. And wind is chaos. I spent this afternoon watching the patterning of air over water, each separate motion creating a spreading directional event in space. The shapes of the gusts were flattened and drawn in 2 dimensions, in light and the pebbling of the lake. Sometimes a form would seem to arise all at once, as a school of fish will move in one mind. First thing this morning, the wind was fully still, and the mist came thick up off the lake. Turning my back to the sun, I watched the mist's shadow cast on the coarse sand of the beach, rising up around mine. It wavered in inconstant bands like heat off pavement, or the image, precisely, of water reflected on overhanging rocks. I have a friend who notices the most beautiful things. She told me once that the patterns on the water and in the clouds are the same, marking different interfaces of the same media. And it's so. Air and water will do the same things to each other, whether met in the atmosphere or on the surface of the lake. The world is fractal, specifically unrepeatable and yet infinitely self-similar, the same fundamental actors yielding the same shapes of creation. Cirrocumulus clouds look like desert sand. The world is itself, over and over again, arisen. October 19th. Today I hiked Black Mountain, primarily for the pleasure of return. Walking a path for the 3rd or 4th time, I find that I begin to know the turnings, and to recognize myself in the pattern of the landscape there. A human being drawn to move in the fragments of land not already signed and dedicated to human use wrestles necessarily with the interaction. At this juncture in the course of human events, human pressure has effectively transformed most of the land that exists. The thoughtful struggle of people working with wilderness, or with the idea of wilderness, returns continually to the question of how land can be preserved from that overwhelm. It has birthed, among other things, a philosophy of leave no trace, which asks of people that they confine the heaviness of their action to the places we have already claimed for humanity, and leave what is still untouched well enough alone. I respect the urgency of this call. And yet, the effort to preserve the world from humans draws a bright, hard line between the two, and the separation is dangerous. Last year, in a conversation discussing William Cronin's essay, The Trouble with Wilderness, Kaya's father wrote to us, the trouble, as I see it, is that leaving no trace is a two-way street, and the place, in turn, leaves no trace upon you. You visit like an alien who does not belong, who can look but not touch, can't eat anything, can't drink the water, can't seek shelter, only bring shelter, can't in any way sustain yourself from the land, and in many places, can't even urinate or defecate, just to make the disconnection complete. The disconnection, he describes, is, I think, the root and source of a madness, which lets people move like blitzkrieg through our landscapes, rather than understanding ourselves as a part of them. I am a creature of this place, and I don't think that I can live confined to trails and keep my sanity, or dignity either. The world does not exist as a series of drawn and established lines, nor a view to be had to either side of these. If you are on a road, you are in a human landscape, though the wilderness stretch out endless to either side, and a human spirit will not bear well a life lived only inside of its own box. To know the world requires first walking into it. Moreover, the instinct of stewardship is born of love and of real knowledge. People cannot live well in relationship to land that they have never known with anything like intimacy. The ethic that instructs a walker to stay only on prescribed routes is one that speaks in defense of land, when so much land is already lost under human feet. I would not have this sweet mountain overrun, and just now, people lack skill or care to walk lightly. When I can, I go barefoot. With the barriers down, I can begin to accurately feel the land where I am moving and accept the feedback of its fragility and resilience. But still, it's difficult to offer constant attention to the work of travel, and I can't help but feel every scar and moss or undergrowth I leave behind me as a reproach. It is difficult to be careful enough. I came to Black Mountain's East Peak as the afternoon was growing later, the northern sky bright blue, the sun briefly behind clouds to the west. The tree cover broke, and the ridge ran out to blueberry scrub and bare rock face. Down the mountain and outwards, the land was all a patterning of red-turning forest, the hills a rising container for the linking streams of ponds and lakes lowering gradually towards the ocean. I stayed on through sunset and into the dusk, taking an early supper of carrots and cheese and beginning to write, but mostly just living, still and grateful.